Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. Williams. Here. Thank you. The board held an executive session on July 26th to discuss an administrative employee and a high school assistant principal. At the same meeting, the board also held an information and strategy session regarding the negotiation of a memorandum of understanding related to a collective bargaining agreement with the Pine-Richland Education Association with respect to virtual education. The board also held an executive session just prior to this meeting on August 2nd to interview a recommended candidate for an administrative position, to discuss negotiations of a memorandum of understanding to a collective bargaining agreement with the Pine-Richland Education Association related to virtual instruction, an administrative employee, and a student matter. Item 1.02 is recognition of visitors. We'll have Ms. Mueller with us tonight just to review our policy regarding public comment at our meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Can everyone hear me okay with my mask on? Okay, thank you. I would like to remind everyone of Board Policy 903, which relates to public participation in board meetings. At the outset, the board recognizes the value to school governance of public comment on educational issues and the importance of involving the public in board meetings. The board also recognizes it has a responsibility for proper governance of the district and the need to conduct business in an orderly and efficient manner. To that end, all participants must be recognized by the presiding officer and must preface their comments by announcing their name, address, and group or firm affiliation if applicable. Each participant will have a total of 3 minutes to make their statement or statements. The portions of the meeting during which the public is invited to speak may be limited to 60 minutes. All statements must be directed to the presiding officer, and no participant may address or question board members individually. Lastly, please be advised that the presiding officer or the solicitor may interrupt or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant, request an individual to leave the meeting if the person is not observing reasonable decorum, or call a recess or adjourn the meeting to another time when the lack of public decorum interferes with the orderly conduct of a meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. I would also add, I can't pretend to know the reason everyone is here, but for those who are here to address our health and safety plan, we do have an update at the very top of our agenda. And if you'd like to wait till we get through that, we obviously will be offering, as we always do, time for public comment after we deliver that update to the public as well. We do not have any online speakers, is my understanding. Is that correct? And you have a speakers list?
Good evening. We're good? Good. I know you said you were going to address the health and safety plan at the top of the meeting, but I still wanted to speak on that. I am Russell Patterson. I live at 301 Balsa. So thank you for having me this evening. So I'm speaking on behalf of children that are under 12 who are unable to be vaccinated. Essentially, this means that there will be school buildings filled with all unvaccinated children. We, as community members, school board members, must make every effort to keep our children and families safe and healthy. Many of them have younger siblings, some are living with grandparents, some have family members that are even immunocompromised. We also need to make every effort to keep our PR staff healthy. Of course, because we love our teachers and educators, of course, and we want them and their families to be healthy. But additionally, there is a national substitute shortage, meaning if they become ill, it's very challenging to find qualified staff to fill their shoes, and schools cannot operate without staff. I'm speaking as a parent of 3 children, 2 that were unable to be vaccinated. I'm speaking as the husband of a physician whose primary population is the elderly. We all know they are the most vulnerable. And I'm speaking as a person that supports 1 billion trillion percent. I support in-person, brick and mortar, 5 days a week, teaching and learning. And I want to protect that by any means necessary. So therefore, this evening, I'm asking for the buildings that serve populations of children under 12 to have mask requirements. Thank you for your time this evening.
Good evening, everyone. I'm John Bigley. I live at 714 Bristlecone Drive in Pine-Richland Township. Tonight, we're going to hear several speakers on the topic of student safety, and I'm sure the board's going to present its plan too. I believe that society is judged on how well it protects its innocent, and how innocent can children, especially children who can't protect themselves, be. I served in the United States Army and in the Army Reserve for over 33 years. I served in many commands. In fact, I was command of most of the commands I was in. I've served in the Far East, in Europe, and in the Middle East. And in all my deployments and in all my countries that I visited, that I served for, one of my main goals was to protect the children. In fact, we did many missions to ensure that civilians were put at no risk at all. All that have served with me believe in the great defense of this country and share its core values. One of the values we really, truly cherish is the defense of the defenseless. The speakers tonight represent a new volunteer parents alliance called Protect Our Students in Pine-Richland Now, or Prosper Now. That you can find at prospr.org. This organization exists that the Pine-Richland School District is free from sexual, racial harassment, bullying, hazing, violence, intimidation, and sexual assault of all and any kind. Protect Our Students in Pine and Pine-Richland Now was founded by my next door neighbors. They've been my neighbors for over 25 years and have a great relationship with them and their family, the Baxters. Many other families have now aligned with them and are taking action to ensure our children are safe in the school district. This can only be accomplished by all of us in the Pine-Richland community, the students, the parents, the educators, and those in this room, all standing together for the sole purpose. Tonight's Prosper Now asks to hear these courageous speakers and to join them in their action so that we can all work together in keeping our community, Pine-Richland, safe and our children. Some of the words spoken tonight might be upsetting to some, especially to survivors of sexual violence. I want to introduce Susie. Susie. She's from the Pittsburgh Action Alliance Against Rape. She is here for anyone who needs support or just wants to talk to her about something that may need to be addressed. Susie will be available after this meeting and after the public comment section of this meeting. The first speaker is Ana Luisa that's following me.
Is she next on the list?
Ms. Williams, do we have a yeah, so do we have a speaker order?
Yeah, we do, the way they're signed up here.
Is that considered?
Bigley is done, so I would assume we move on to our next one.
We need to move on to our next speaker.
Just by way of information, for this public comment period, we call the public as they're registered on the sign-in sheet. So we'll go to the next person who signed in.
Our next speaker will be Anna Baxter.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anna Baxter, and I live at 716 Bristlecone Drive. I'm 18 and I'm here to make sure what happened to me at Pine-Richland never happens again to anyone else. Although, all through my freshman year, one boy kept calling me the N-word at school and telling me to go hang myself. Another made sexual motions and comments to me in almost all of my classes. I was scared each day and I started to fail my classes. So I told my parents and we reported all of it to the school. Principal Bowman told me that
I'm sorry, just, excuse me, I understand it's a sensitive issue, but I would just ask we not personally direct comments toward anyone. So please refrain from
Can I
from
comment?
speaking
It says
names.
no personal attacks. Addressing people who are doing
Personally-
their conduct
personally
of their business-
directed.
I will speak. Addressing people's names who are doing their conduct of business is not a personal attack.
This is not the forum. As you're well aware, Mr. Baxter, there are forums available for these types of allegations or complaints. So public comment period, we cannot name names.
Fine, we will
Okay,
not name
a-
names.
A principal who will not be named. Go ahead.
my high school principal told me that I couldn't do anything about the racial harassment because it was, quote, protected free speech. For the sexual harassment, the school never asked the witnesses I said I could provide. Then on January 7th, 2019, during my sophomore year, my entire world stopped. I was raped during school.
Again, and I'm so sorry to interrupt because I do understand the sensitivity, but this is not the forum for making any type of criminal complaints or
I'm sorry,
allegations.
it's not a criminal.
Again, as
is
your-
student safety the business of the board? Is student safety the business of the board? She will
I'm
get her
perfectly
3 minutes.
understand.
She will get her 3 minutes and she will speak.
I'm just going to,
Stop interrupting.
excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. Again, this is a business meeting of the school district. We have an agenda before us. There are other avenues available. If you would like to talk to someone with the school district, I believe there's pending litigation. You can go through your attorney. Well, I'm just.
Nothing happened. I did on every.
We will, she will speak.
I did everything. I reported it to the school.
It will become relevant. You will understand where she's going. We're not here to complain about what happened with her because the U.S. government is taking care of that for us. Please let her finish. You'll see
You will
the relevance.
understand soon when you hear the other speakers.
My entire world stopped. I was raped during school in the high school building. I immediately told the school and the police and had to go to the hospital for a rape kit exam, which was awful. For a long time, I couldn't eat or sleep and I was afraid to leave my bedroom. After 6 months, even though my parents insisted, the school still hadn't investigated my assault, so I did not feel safe returning to school. So I testified in front of a judge, and the judge issued a violence protection order. Even with the protection order going back to school to the building was not good, and I was still traumatized. For a survivor, the pain doesn't end when the assault does. I have chronic pain every day, and even 2.5 years later, I have PTSD and flashbacks. Lots of the times, I can't stop throwing up for weeks. By then, I'm dehydrated and throwing up blood. I have been admitted to Children's Hospital 11 times, 36 days for problems related to the assault, even though I have never been hospitalized before the assault. Next week, I start a special 3-week inpatient trauma treatment program at a world-famous hospital far from home, away from my family. I had more than 150 doctors and therapy appointments because of my assault, and I'm working hard to recover, but a few months ago, 2 years after my assault, I suddenly went completely blind. My vision is not 100% back. My doctors told me these are responses to trauma. A year after the assault, my family sent complaints to the U.S. government because the school still hadn't investigated. That's when we got letters from the school signed by our superintendent saying my little brother and I would have to go to, quote, alternative schools because of, quote, emotional disturbance. My parents fought for 7 months against forcibly removing us and won. My but my trauma was still too much to be in the high school building. I wasn't able to return to band, the school musical, JRTC, or the softball team. But I wanted to make a difference at the school. So some of my friends and I founded a new cold club, Students Against Sexual Harassment, or SASH Club, with our assistant principal and
Ms.
our.
Baxter, I did reset that 3 o'clock, 3 minutes to start before any of those interruptions. So if you
Thank
could,
you.
so if you could though, wind up. that'd
She
be
is
appreciated.
close to winding up.
Thank you.
Some of my friends and I founded a new club called Students Against Sexual Harassment, or SASH Club, with the assistant principal and our school psychologist as the advisors. We had virtual meetings all year and led a big campaign in April to teach students about sexual harassment and assault. Our club grew to 25 members. For a long time, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep living, but with the help of my friends and my family and Pittsburgh Action Against Rape, I'm taking back my life. I graduated from Pine-Richland with a home tutor and even made honor roll. Attending graduation was hard, but I did with my classmates. All the time at Children's Hospital has inspired me to study nursing. I got accepted into my dream college and I start classes in a month. I want to work at Children's Hospital to be there for the sick and injured children. And I'm here tonight to make sure no child at Pine-Richland ever has to go through what I did. Borrowing words from author and survivor Alex L., I'm not a victim for sharing my story. I'm a survivor, setting the world on fire with my truth, and I never know who needs my light, my warmth, and raging courage. For anyone listening, just know that you aren't alone, that you are a warrior, and that I believe you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baxter. Ms. Williams, do we have the next speaker? The name, is it on the same topic? Do we know? Who is the next speaker? Who again?
No, we, and just,
I want to get through this topic first and then have you address.
Sure.
Okay. Do we know the next speaker?
I'm Jill Baxter, and the beautiful, courageous young woman you just heard from is my daughter. I echo honest thank you to Doctors Sevilla and Ramirez, who have consistently acted in the students' best interests. Many of us here tonight represent the New Parent Alliance, Protect Our Students in Pine and Richland Now, or Prosper Now, PROSPRnow.org. We want to clarify the school's obligations to protect students, starting with Title IX, a federal regulation protecting students against sex discrimination. It mandates that for an allegation of sexual harassment or sexual assault, a public school must conduct its own prompt, impartial investigation independent from police. Anna's assault was reported to the school that day. For over a year, we repeatedly wrote to the district requesting an investigation clearly referencing Title IX obligations. The district refused every request and even responded that it is their policy not to do such an investigation. I quote, "Anytime the district receives an allegation of sexual assault, we immediately turn that investigation over to the Northern Regional Police Department as we did in this case. There is not a parallel internal investigation performed by the district." The district thus implied that it has never conducted its own investigation into any allegation of sexual assault ever received. We filed multiple complaints with the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, or OCR, which enforces Title IX. The district then gave us documents signed by the superintendent intended to forcibly place both Anna and our son in, quote, alternative schools. In our opinion, this was retaliation for our escalating this to the U.S. Department of Education. Retaliation is expressly forbidden under Title IX. We hired an attorney and fought this for 7 months until the district eventually backed down. The Office for Civil Rights has told us that Pine-Richland has been under investigation for our 4 complaints of not protecting students and retaliating against students. These are posted on their website. We expect OCR will mandate sweeping change to district policies when the investigation is complete. More than a year after Anna's assault, Pine-Richland hired a lawyer to review our evidence.
Rather than investigating, she simply used 98% of the lines in her final report to list every possible source of doubt in our 200 pages of evidence. The district again then told us that it, quote, deems that issue to be closed. In the years since we founded Prosper Now, our team has spoken with many families reporting similar experiences related to sexual assaults. Some of their children are so terrified that the family will not speak publicly. We are speaking because what we are seeing suggests a pattern of district behavior that trivializes sexual assault, intimidates victims from coming forward, and retaliates against them when they do. We believe that only urgent, sweeping changes enacted before the start of the upcoming year will keep our children safe.
Next be where, Barb?
The next person on the list is Heather Kiskow.
Ms. Kiskal, are you on the same topic? Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Heather Kiso. I live at 812 Bruton Drive, Gibsonia. Mother of 3 Pine-Richland students and a 15-year resident of Richland. Many of you know me from my tenure as president of HANS and many activities, and I've supported you many, many times. Today I'm addressing on behalf of Prosper Now concerning issues. As a director for shelters and a social worker as trade, and the director of a child care center, the safety and protection of vulnerable populations, including children, are very important to me. During the same time that the Baxters kept demanding a proper investigation of honest assault, my daughter was repeatedly sexually assaulted on a Pine-Richland school bus. She was terrified and started getting a friend to walk her out of school each day for protection. She dropped out of Beatty, even though she loved the course, so she could minimize the number of bus rides she took each day. She didn't know what to do. For a month, she was even too afraid to tell me what was happening, and she knows I work with survivors every day. She was especially against coming forward to report the assaults to the school because she heard what happened to Anna and didn't believe the school believed or protect her. Speaking up is hard. It's hard for adults. It's even harder for kids. 3 courageous classmates who knew of my daughter's assault eventually came forward to report them to school. That's what opened the door with their support and the support of the school. My daughter eventually felt able to admit that she had been assaulted. And honest courage in stepping forward tonight convinced my daughter to finally share with me her assault. When my daughter spoke to the school and confirmed the assaults her friends reported were true, in my opinion, the district not follow up with proper Title IX investigation. They did not ask for the names of witnesses and didn't inform us of any sanctions, although both are required by federal regulations. As a district, we need to recognize the impact of sexual harassment and assault. Survivors are more likely to drop out of school, develop anxiety disorders, addictions, and a range of serious medical problems. It also statistically increases the odds of future victimization and homelessness. In other words, responding immediately and equitably to allegations of sexual assault is essential for students' safety and well-being. And sexual assault happening in the school needs to be addressed thoroughly, compassionately, and in full accordance with every federal regulation, because protecting an illusion of a perfect school instead of protecting our children cannot be an option. This is my trade. Boy, did I fail. And I've given you everything I had as a school district and everything that I've done. And I don't understand. I don't.
Our next speaker, Laura Oland.
Ms. Oland, is this on the same topic as well?
You bet it is.
My name is Kristen Rose Baxter. I live at 716 Bristlecone Drive. I am here to play a recording on behalf of Laura Olin.
Ms. Baxter?
Mrs. Baxter, can you, one time, I had said Laura Oland was our next person on the list.
Yeah, she has a recorded statement.
Oh.
My name is Laura Oland, a resident of Richland Township. As a highly engaged parent of 5 children and a past school board president, I am very proud of our program, both in and outside the classroom. Our parents and community, and particularly our staff, whose commitment to education was clear as they worked above and beyond during COVID-19. But speaking to you as the representatives of our children's education and well-being in school, you've failed to look out for our students on numerous occasions. For those of you who know me throughout my tenure on the board from 2011 through 2016, I looked at every policy and decision through a student-first perspective. Safety from sexual assault was a personal passion, and Anna Baxter's devastating story and amazing courage has brought me here to speak out candidly like her. Although I am physically in the Seattle mountains, I am compelled to come forward tonight and state this is not an isolated example of the district losing sight of the student best interest. Recall that in March of 2016, a former girls basketball coach pleaded guilty to having sex with a student player, was sent to prison, and is now a lifetime registered sex offender. I can attest the district was made aware of the issues with Coach Cliff Foster much further in advance than when appropriate action was taken. Related to an issue we have recently heard discussed quite a bit at board meetings, I can also personally attest to the serious, improper interrogative procedures used by the district to obtain information from students. In my case, the outcome was severely emotionally traumatizing to one of my children. To all the victims of sexual assault and other traumas experienced in the district, every victim is one too many. To those of you who now hold power and have a chance to do the right thing, be as worthy as those who have the courage to stand up and speak publicly.
Our next speaker is Nancy Bazinski. I yield my time. The next one is Tom Baxter.
I'm Tom Baxter of Prosper Now. I'm a 25-year Pine resident at 716 Bristlecone. Tonight we've heard of failures of the district responding to allegations of sexual assault and from a former board president of unlawful delay in reporting to law enforcement suspicion that the girls' basketball coach at that time was in an improper relationship with a student. Numerous other families have informed Prosper Now of similar experiences who could not speak tonight. And that suggests to us a pattern of district behavior that trivializes sexual assault, intimidates victims from coming forward, and retaliates against them if they do. We now ask the board, all the educators, and the community to email contact@prospernow.org or go to prospernow.org to report if you were not satisfied with the district's response to a complaint of any form of student safety in the last 10 years. Because we want to inform the board that we intend to gather these reports from the community and submit what we find to the proper authorities for investigation, including, first, to the Pennsylvania Department of Education's Office of Chief Counsel, who is empowered with investigating and prosecuting misconduct complaints that may violate its Code of Professional Conduct for educators, including administrators. Sanctions may include suspension or revocation of one's certification. Second, to the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas, we will invoke Pennsylvania Act 14, Section 318, which allows for 10 residents of a school district to file a petition for the removal of any school board director for, quote, neglect of duty. Except for Ms. Hayden, we intend to petition for the removal of every single Pine-Richland board director because of what has occurred under their watch. Each board director may contest their removal at a hearing, which will be open to the public and to the media. Third, to law enforcement to investigate possible violations of at least 5 Pennsylvania criminal statutes. First, the Child Protective Services Law for which it is a criminal offense to violate mandatory reporting laws. Also under the Child Protective Services Law, child abuse and neglect. Also, Criminal Code Section 4304, child endangerment. Also, Criminal Code Section 2705, reckless endangerment. Also, Section 4952, intimidation of witnesses or victims. Finally, to the Federal Bureau of Investigations for possible violation of the Federal Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act. To move the district forward with a clean slate, we ask that the superintendent and assistant superintendent submit their resignations by August 16th, 2 weeks from tonight. If they do not, we ask the board to immediately conduct a hearing and take a majority vote to remove them as per Pennsylvania Act 14, Section 514, for, quote, incompetence or neglect of duty for what has happened under their watch. Finally, we call on all board members, except Ms. Hayden, to submit their resignations by August 31st. Pennsylvania Act 14, Section 316
Mr. Baxter,
outlines
your 3
filling the
minutes have
vacancies.
expired.
10 more seconds. Pennsylvania Act 14, Section 316 outlines filling the vacancies of a majority of school board directors. We will make one more statement outside for the media shortly. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kristen Baxter. James Baxter. Our last speaker is Joe Casario.
This is the last speaker?
It is.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe Casario. I live at 334 McIntosh Drive. I'm here to report a very concerning and unprofessional action by one of the board members of Pine-Richland School District. I spoke at a board meeting a couple weeks ago, and I spoke in opposition to your extending of the contracts of the superintendent and assistant superintendent. I didn't agree, and I expressed my opinion, which is my First Amendment right. I was not argumentative, and I was not offensive. After I expressed my thoughts, I took my seat, sat beside my wife, and what happened next is why I'm here tonight. I looked up and I saw a board member glaring at me. And I said, okay, I guess he's upset with what I said. But he kept glaring at me, kept staring at me. And I thought, well, this is getting a little weird. He stared at me for about 15 seconds. It's a long time. I thought, wow, this guy's staring at me. He obviously doesn't know that this isn't gonna work. So I kept staring. I guess I looked at him, he looked at me, and he finally looked away. And I just couldn't believe that this was happening at a board meeting. There I was, did nothing wrong, expressed my thoughts. And I thought, this is a very long, uncomfortable 15 seconds, but I thought it was kind of funny. I kind of find the humor in a lot of things. And when we left the board meeting, I told my wife and my kids, and I said, you can't believe what happened. I said my piece, I sat down, and this board member kept staring at me. He kept staring at me. And President Lyons, it wasn't you. And honestly, I found it funny, but I thought it was very unprofessional and extremely immature in going against the concept and the ideals of a representative republic. We are here to express our thoughts. You represent us. And I kept thinking to myself, why was he staring at me? And then it came to me, I think he's trying to intimidate me. Is he trying to intimidate me to maybe make me not speak next time? To stare me down and say, nah, don't do it again, because I see you and I'm staring at you. But it just kept bothering me. He kept staring at me. And I kept thinking to myself, but he was trying to intimidate me. But then I thought, no, it's not about me. It's about we. It wasn't intimidating me. It wasn't going to happen. He's trying to intimidate me. We. That can't happen in this situation. I don't agree with a lot of things you people do. I agree with some things you people do. I probably agree with more than I disagree, because you're all here to do one thing, is try and help the children. President, I would like to know what your plan of action is to make sure that this never happens again to someone who could be more easily intimidated. Somebody young, somebody elderly, somebody shy, somebody scared. And if you want to contact me, and I can tell you who that board member is, it was super inappropriate, and it should never happen again. And I'd like to know a public plan of action. And that board member was Mr. Mahalik.
Mr. Casario, your 3 minutes are up.
And I appreciate
If
your
you'd like
time,
to
and
send
I'd
your
like to hear
inquiry
what
by
we plan to
email.
do about it.
I'm trying hard not to look at you
Thank
right
you.
now, so thank you.
I would,
This is, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to say, I mean, we are at a bit of a disadvantage in some of the topics that were raised here. Those who wish to litigate should do so in the courts, and non-public forums like this are the best. Mr. Baxter, I listened.
You interrupted me, it's fine, go ahead.
Mr. Baxter, I listened.
Say that.
This is not the place to air those or get into those details, because we have to protect student confidentiality, and there are more appropriate forums. I was present on this board for some time. I disagree, and know facts to be otherwise in some of it. I think our solicitor, Emily Mueller, would like to share a brief statement in this regard as well.
thank you, Mr. Lyons. The Pine-Richland School District Board and Administration respect the right and ability of community and school members to appear in a public forum such as this board meeting to speak. We recognize and appreciate the value of the process, of which public comment is a part. We typically do not respond to public comment during the meeting, other than to acknowledge it. However, we do so tonight because we strongly disagree with some of the statements made earlier tonight regarding allegations of assault and discrimination. For privacy, confidentiality, and other legal reasons, we cannot go into detail except to say that both the district and law enforcement have worked extensively together and separately to investigate these allegations and all circumstances surrounding them, timely, completely, and in accordance with the law. We have at all times been and remain fully committed to and engaged in providing and maintaining a safe and healthy school environment for all students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Correspondence, Ms. Hawthorne?
That's okay.
Yeah, did you have, I'm sorry, you had one more?
No, we don't, but I do the correspondence.
Correspondence.
Yeah. The board received a letter from the State Tax Equalization Board regarding assessment. The information contained in the letter does not have much of an effect on our tax assessed values because Allegheny County reflects market value with periodic reassessments. The board also received a letter from the Pennsylvania Department of Education acknowledging receipt and approval of the PlanCon Part K project refinancing for the issuance of general obligation notes series of 2021 to refund series of 2016. The following people emailed the board regarding superintendent and assistant superintendent contract renewals: Ashley Fortier, George Clay, Christine Anderson, Dr. Robin Rochelle, Dawn Augustine, Nancy Klein, Ron Heil, Lisa Plant. The following people emailed the board regarding mass guidance: Maya Golden Perschbacher, Ashley DeChellis, Jamie Delaney, Valerie and Seth Corbin, Emily Ammerman, Jennifer Busey, Diane White, Elizabeth Casario, Rebecca Hoffman, Melissa Child, Billy Higgins, Laura Potosky, Bobby Bedish, Erica McClure, Mark Avalone, Doug and Cindy Schwab, Sarah Irwin, Dawn Augustine, Judy Masucci, Jennifer Neal, Jillian Gill, Maria Jasic, Chris Waltz, Amy Fleming, Sharon Donatelli, Melissa Armstrong, Ryan Conley, Rhiannon Brown, Amy Jenkinson, Ashley Fortier, Carol Foglio. The following people emailed the board: Allison Duncan regarding the health and safety plan, Alexis Strothmeyer regarding the health and safety plan, Stephanie and Joel Hurt regarding the safety and health and safety plan, Rebecca Mette Carter regarding the health and safety plan, Melissa Nicely regarding the health and safety plan, and Jess Horner regarding parent and student surveys.
Thank you. Item 1.04 is a motion to approve the meeting minutes as attached from the July 12th meeting.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.01 is a health and safety plan update. Can we take a second just let the room get settled?
Sure. Mr. Riley, if we could pull up the PowerPoint. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lyons. We have a health and safety plan update tonight. This is an information discussion item, so no action is planned by the board tonight for the health and safety plan. An outline of tonight, little reminder just in terms of the continuum. We'll talk a bit about updated guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics and CDC, some of what's happening with conditions and cases, some key points for consideration, not just by Pine-Richland, but by school districts across, the United States. A recommendation to conduct some surveys of our families and staff, and then again, talking a little bit about next school year. So one of the areas that is most critical, and we had a joint governance meeting before tonight, is we're excited to welcome the students back to school. And one of the top goals is to maximize in-person learning for our students. We know it's important not only academically, intellectually, but also social and emotionally. We want to be able to continue co- and extracurricular activities, including athletics, and we want to be able to sustain that, and music. One of the goals that we have fundamentally is to also limit disruptions in the continuity of that learning for students, and that's something that we have to think about. It's something that was a part of last year, and as we prepare for this upcoming year, we need to understand what that means and consider it, and then finally, the ability to make adjustments as needed based upon what's happening around us. So this is a model that everybody has seen, and one of the realities of what's happening in the region is that we shifted from the July 12th meeting, our last meeting. At the time, we were in low in terms of community transmission. During the last few weeks, we've seen a change to moderate. Even when we prepared this presentation, we were in the moderate zone. Today on the CDC website, as it looks at our county, Allegheny County specifically, we've reached the substantial level of transmission within the community. Again, the main point just being the conditions and cases are changing, and we're seeing some of those worsening conditions with the Delta variant. So some other things have happened as well. The first is we have the American Academy of Pediatrics has issued a statement, so around recommendations related to masking in schools. The CDC last week, and this was probably the biggest sort of unexpected communication, but the CDC reversed some of its recommendations in terms of vaccinated versus unvaccinated people, but also recommendations around masking in schools. So since our last meeting, we've had changes not only to public health guidance, but we've also had a change in the conditions and cases with respect to the Delta variant and COVID. And we know, and we've heard expressed, and we understand, and believe me, we empathize with the reality. It's confusing, and it leads to a lack of confidence that can erode when guidance changes. And again, we understand that. We also know we still have several weeks before the start of the 21-22 school year. So things change, and we have to be able to acknowledge that. With respect to COVID, and also specifically with masking, there are strongly held opinions. There are strongly held opinions. There are politicized topics that are happening not just in this school board environment, but across the country in school boards. That's just the nature of what it is that we have happening in our country. From a public health guidance perspective, In the United States, we have about 14,000 school districts. In Pennsylvania, we have 500 public school districts. And again, all of those districts, all of those boardrooms, all of those communities are wrestling with some of the same information, trying to provide high-quality in-person instruction to students and also balance that against continuity. These are just, again, this is the Allegheny County dashboard. This information is available. We start to see a little bit of an increase again. But we also see that some of the data on the Allegheny County website talks about age level. And so we know, and the experts in this county and others talk about the fact that for school-age children, hospitalizations are more rare and the most severe outcomes are rare. So again, that's part of what we have to understand and consider with respect to COVID-19. This reflects, so Allegheny County continues to send out their alerts. They do it a few different times per week. And what we've done on this slide, and we've shared this before, is we've been monitoring amongst school-age children. So for students who are 11 or younger, they do not yet have access to a vaccine if the parents would want them to be vaccinated. So specifically, we look at that age group within the county, and we can see, again, the number of cases weekly in the county and what has changed over the last few weeks. Again, this is just the information that's out there. So on the right column, we see that our county incidence rate, this is of all ages, was at 5 per 100,000 a few weeks ago, since really the July 12th time frame. And as of last week, 29.8. So we're seeing an increase in those cases. That's something that we have to monitor and be aware of. So some of the key points, the board did approve our preliminary health and safety plan in July. In that plan, we recommended but did not mandate masks for unvaccinated individuals, with the exception of school buses where there's a federal mandate for masking. Again, other mitigation would continue. So for example, distancing to the extent possible. One of the things that occurred last year, we had more physical distancing within classrooms. We will not have the same degree because 99.5% of our families and students are planning for in-person learning. But we can still do things like use the footprint of the classroom to provide the greatest amount of physical distance without impacting the delivery of programs and services to students. Pointing desks in the same direction as opposed to having them face-to-face. Those are other examples: cleaning, ventilation, sanitation, et cetera. One of the key points for us to understand and for other school districts to understand relates to contact tracing and quarantine. These are still requirements, so we still have a responsibility when notified of a positive case that was in the school to conduct that, to work with the county, conduct contact tracing, and again, there's quarantine depending upon the circumstances. So this can happen at the individual level. It's possible to happen at a classroom level if there would be a cluster of cases. And it is less likely now that we would see something at a building or district level, but again, unlikely, but it's something that we just need to understand it is possible. Mentioned the first part of this. You know, one of the questions that the public health experts are continuing to try to understand is, and if we're in the fifth wave, following increase in cases is increase in hospitalization. And the question is, at what point does that not lead to some of the severe outcomes? And at what point, perhaps, would COVID begin to be managed in a way similar to, let's say, the seasonal flu, as opposed to in ways that lead to quarantine and contact tracing? So again, that's a question that the public health experts continue to wrestle with as they look at the variants and other things that are happening. We know that vaccination doesn't mean immunity. But the research does suggest that the most severe outcomes are prevented through vaccination or reduced significantly. Again, I mentioned we know that vaccines for ages 12 and older have been available for months, and as best as we understand it, the potential for vaccinations for students 11 and under, which was originally thought to be in September, looks more like late 2021 or early 2022. So again, from a procedural standpoint, Contact tracing and quarantine. If we get notice of a case, we have to assist with that. If a student is not vaccinated, or depending on the circumstances, they may need to quarantine for a period of time before they would be able to resume. If a student's in quarantine, they would request and receive work in ways similar to how it occurred before COVID-19. So again, they get their work, they're doing that at home, and then they're returning to the classroom setting. One of the components of the CDC guidance, just for awareness, is that there's a quarantine sort of carve-out exception when masking is in place for those for whom it is in place. So in the middle of this slide, we see in a K-12 indoor classroom setting, the close contact excludes a student if they were correctly and consistently wearing a mask. That's important to understand from the standpoint of impact if and when there are cases within a classroom. So again, there are other prevention strategies required, but this is an important concept for us to see. Our recommendation is that we reach out to our families. So it's our recommendation tomorrow that we send a communication and survey out to all the Pine-Richland families so that parents can share with us what it is that they're thinking about relative to their child as we return to school. So we want to understand the impact of any of the revised CDC guidelines on families' thinking. And I would say most importantly, we want to look at those results based upon grade span. So it is entirely possible that at kindergarten through third grade, an example of a place where a vaccine is not yet available, how parents are feeling and thinking about masking may be different than at the 9 through 12 level where a vaccine has been available for a period of time. So again, we want to ask our parents to be able to understand their perspective and fold that information in with everything else that we are learning and doing. So again, these are sort of the directions. The last thing I would say is at the bottom, in what way or should thresholds also play a part? So what's the difference between low, moderate, substantial, and high, and how might or should those change decisions or recommendations in terms of a health and safety plan? Also included for parents prior to answering the few questions that we've preliminarily identified is just some background. So this talks about what I mentioned before, about where were we on July 12th, what has occurred since then, and again, what does that mean for our family? So this talks about the guidance that has been updated and contact tracing and quarantine. We're getting close to the place where we're coming back to school, so we have to understand by family what it is that they're thinking about. And so some basic demographics will help us segment by building and also by grade span. And the questions that we were looking to ask simply are, given what you've read, background and updated guidance, are you planning to have your child wear a mask during the school day, yes or no? If the answer is no, we are asking the question, are you willing to have your child wear a mask during the school day to reduce the risk of quarantine and disruptions to continuity of learning? So between those two, we'll get a sense of what our parents are thinking and give the opportunity for every parent in Pine-Richland School District to have their voice heard as a part of the planning process. And then finally, are you willing to voluntarily share a child's COVID-19 vaccination status with the school health office? And again, contact tracing is a part of this process. It's going to be a part of what our schools and nurses and health office need to do. And so again, this isn't asking what the status is. This is merely asking, are they willing to voluntarily share that information with the school? So in terms of timeline, our thoughts were communicate to our families tomorrow, ask for them to respond with their thinking by Sunday. We would then be able to look at the results and post the results on the district website by next Tuesday, is how we have it listed here. We have another Healthcare Leadership Council meeting scheduled next week, and then we'll be able to determine and look at whether any changes are appropriate for classrooms or other activities within the school district. Board action, if needed, would be taken August 16th. Questions?
Dr. Pete, we did get some emails. I think they're really focused, probably primarily around the secondary level, about activities. And we didn't get into a lot of detail last month about activities. You know, how different are things going to look as far as you know right now in terms of sports, athletics, dances, lunches? I mean, some of the nitty gritty, which we did hear was an area of concern.
Well, for going into the summer, we did have health and safety plans for all the summer activities, but they're very different from where they were last year. So very lax compared to where we were with all the guidelines and restrictions. What we've said through this plan is we would mirror whatever that is for athletics and activities as well. So the goal is, just like last year, is to get them out, playing, participating, and whatever mitigation strategies we would need to put in place, we would want to do so. But we would anticipate having all those activities available for students to participate in.
And audience members, parents, students.
I haven't seen
basically,
any guidelines
we
on
have
capacity
there's no
limits
reason
yet.
not to, right?
Yeah,
Because
I have
of-
not seen any
yeah.
limits on capacity at this point, no.
Yeah, I would say also, from everything we've looked at, outdoor environments are considered still
Yeah.
very positive places. So it's more the indoor environments that are the concern.
Yeah, we're gearing up for band camp and football starting up with heat acclimation. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are picking up here in the next couple of weeks. And again, just talking about what are some of those somewhat minor mitigation, obviously keeping the students outside, keeping them separated as much as possible, doing those type of things if there's food involved, spreading kids out. So we have started to talk to coaches and sponsors about that, but very different from where we were this time last year.
So, Dr.
Team,
Miller,
if I could, I raised my hand. I don't know if it's okay if I go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to go back to the point around immunizations and the voluntary submission of that documentation. While our school nurses have access to the statewide immunization database, we do rely on provision of that information from families and doctors on, their official letterhead, et cetera, how they provide that to us to actually enter it in our student information system. And that really would help with reporting for cases where we are doing contact tracing, et cetera, to remove folks from what would otherwise be kind of a quarantine listing and call, et cetera. So wanted to just put that out there that if families have that, sending it into the school nurse would be appropriate. Again, makes me rely on that documentation despite having access to the other statewide database.
And to be clear, all we're asking right now is, are they comfortable sharing that? We're not actually
Correct, but
requesting
if
any of that
someone would
information at
want
this
to
time.
provide that and is comfortable and is looking for a place to send that, the nurses would be the appropriate ones for sure.
so Dr. Miller, you had the one comment about if needed on August 16th, the updated, an updated plan or vote. The if needed would be if it were to change from the current approved plan, correct?
That's correct. It's so what has happened since July 12th has what has happened in terms of cases, conditions, thresholds, guidance, et cetera. Does that warrant change to the plan?
So if we don't vote on it, then what we have is a no mandate, recommended, parents choose kind of a plan.
Yeah, the way it stands as written now is, and again, that was based on guidance that existed when the board met in July, was that the CDC guidance at that time was really around if you were vaccinated, masks were not recommended in any environment, indoor or outdoor. So that was different then. And there was no commentary really about schools. It was recommended but optional. And so the difference that has occurred between then and now is the revised CDC guidance. That's part of it. The other part of it is the increase in amount of virus in the community. So those are the two big things that are different from July 12th.
I just wanted to decouple the data from the current approved plan. So the current approved plan, unless it changes, is parents choose.
That's correct,
Right.
and that's K-12.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So the survey results aren't going to alter the plan. It's going to be data. And I guess from my standpoint, what data, is this going to be a healthcare leadership council meeting before this? what data would alter us to say we're going to mandate it?
So
I guess I'm looking for specifics. Are you looking at incidents? Are you looking at hospitalizations? Again,
I think the you is we. So what we'll do is the first thing that I would say is asking every parent what they're thinking about for the fall with respect to masks is part of what we're talking about. So the fundamental goal that we talked about here, our fundamental goal is to have kids in-person learning K-12. 99.5% of our parents selected that option. So that's our number one goal. Not only to get them back into in-person learning, but to keep them in in-person learning, not disrupted through quarantine or other things that have to happen within a school day. So that's where we are first and foremost. We fully expect that parents' feelings for 11 and under may be different than their feelings for 12 and older. Some of our parents are waiting for that opportunity to have their child vaccinated. Some aren't. We respect that. But we believe that asking them what their intentions are for the fall is a helpful piece of information that we can then use as one piece of information to consider any recommendations. So that is data. I don't know that it's like majority data, if this then that, but it's a piece of information that lets us understand what our parents are thinking in the entire district about masking specifically. We've gone from low to moderate, today from moderate to substantial. That's data and information that we have to understand. At what point do we need to consider something else? The agencies are clear about their recommendations. Whether agree or disagree, whether confidence is eroded or not eroded, the reality is the agency guidance is pretty consistently clear now. Different than where we were on July 12th. That's data and information.
I guess, you know, when I look at these questions, we're asking, are you planning to have your child wear a mask? Are you planning to have your child wearing a mask during the school day to reduce? Okay, so if let's just say it's 50-50 and we give everyone the choice, whether somebody's willing to share their their information on vaccinations or not, let's say it's 50-50 as well. That information of itself, to me, plays to parent choice regardless, unless we ask another question, which again, I'm still not in favor of, but if we ask another question that says, if conditions change to X, Y, or Z, would you change your mask choice, if you will? Or would you want to pull your child out and go back to a hybrid? Those are kind of things that I guess what I'm asking is, if I know 50% or 70% or however many are going to mask their children or not, regardless of that information, how does that play based on the other data on what the parents actually want? Unless you can't look at it in a vacuum.
Agreed.
I mean,
it's one more piece of information. Right now, if I were to say, how do our K-3 families think? What do they think about masking? We don't know.
So if it's 70-30, are we then going to say, well, 70 to mask, 30 to not mask? Are we going to say, well, then we're going to take the choice away from the 30 to leave their children unmasked?
I think we're going to say we now know it's 70-30. What does that mean to us? And what does that mean to us with respect to the guidance? What does it mean to us in terms of the conditions? I mean, I think from our perspective, it's information we do not have that helps us listen. You know, some of the feedback we receive is, listen. We're listening. And so if we receive an email, that tells us the sender of the email was thinking something. If we ask a question around this specific topic, we're going to better understand what our parents are thinking. And then we can consider that information and what that means to us.
Yeah, I understand. I guess where I'm going is we're basically asking parents, what are your choices going to be? And we're saying right now, we're going to give the parents the choice, so I don't see how the survey changes that.
So in terms of giving the parents the choice, I think what we're saying, the current approved plan gives parents the choice.
Right.
What we're asking is, what are you planning to do when school returns with respect to masking? we're asking them, what
Right.
choice is it that they would make? And do they feel differently today when cases are increasing and the thresholds are changing? Do they feel different today than they felt on July 1st when the incidence rate was extremely low?
Well, that's what I'm not seeing are you changing because of incident rates? I'm just seeing, are you planning to wear? Would you wear one to reduce risks? I'm not seeing, are
So-
you
so the-
changing your opinion because of, that's, I guess, the
Right.
missing piece to me in this survey.
Understood.
Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, so I think, and we're open to that. So if.
It's
if-
in the introduction, though. I mean,
It's in the we have directions, we have background, and so on. But I understand your point, which is to say, if we put a qualifier on it, such as, if the Allegheny County high threshold is reached, then would you feel differently?
Right.
Versus substantial, which we're currently in, or versus low. So, I mean, that's all something we could ask. We thought this was the simplest approach at this point, just to really just say, what are you thinking about for the start of school? Are you gonna have your kid wearing a mask or not?
I agree
I think
with
some-
the simplicity.
I think some parents, because simplicity's feedback we got,
Yeah.
some parents may not recognize that quarantine's still possible. So we want in-person learning. What we don't necessarily want is I'm back tomorrow or here for 3 days, and then I'm home for a period of time. That doesn't feel good. If universal masking or if masking at certain age ranges allows continuity to happen, how would you weigh that? That's part of what we're asking in this. So again, I think it may not be all of the information, but I do think it would be helpful to understand, to look inside the box a little bit and understand how each and every family is feeling and what they were planning to do for masking. And then again, it's one piece of information for us to consider where we are.
I mean, doing the survey, great, get the input and so on. Public health knowledge and information also needs to weigh in the decision that we've made. So we don't, for example, put up for a popular vote of whether or not parents would be willing to send their children to school with lice or not. We rely upon public health guidelines and information so that we don't do things like that. So we have another situation with COVID, with the Delta variant, that's on the rise. All the CDC guidelines are saying you should be masking indoors where there's substantial spread. We have letter from over 400 doctors all over Allegheny County requesting a mask mandate in our school system. And all of that should not be discounted based off of only what the survey says. The survey should give us some insight as to what's happening, but that needs to be balanced with what public health professionals say about this. And I would expect our Healthcare Leadership Council to weigh in on this as well too. And I think we should make a decision about this plan based off of where things are going, what we know, and because we don't do it for other public health matters. You know, if children have a high fever, they stay home from school. Okay, why do we do that? So that we don't make things worse in school. It's pretty simple, and
But-
we have a situation where the very simple act of wearing a mask can mitigate risk for many people if there's substantial spread in school system.
But to your point on, you use lice as an example. So if somebody had COVID, we would send them home. We would keep them home. We would also quarantine.
But
if
you
somebody
may not
had
know.
lice,
COVID symptoms are different than
but
that.
but if we
You
had
can
somebody that
infect
had
people
lice,
before you show symptoms.
we would send them home. Any students that were in contact, we would also take mitigation risks. We wouldn't put hairnets on every person in the school. That's kind of my point. Again, it's a little bit different than.
It is a little bit
Yeah.
different.
I'm good where we're at with the plan, but I have to say, there are, those who say this is freedom, it's not an issue about freedom. If you want to drive 50 miles an hour down Warrendale Road, you may not. You may not. You'll get a summons. It's illegal. You're not free to do that. The number of things you're not free to do in a civil society are huge, and we take them for granted, right? So it's not free. It's really just about, is it effective? Is it worth the cost? You know, and do the conditions warrant it? That's it can't simply be an absolute, you know, measure, because in every other area of our life, you know, we have these constraints, especially when they impact other people. We heard from a speaker tonight, we've heard from letter writers who are concerned about their children who can't get vaccinated, right? And they can wear a mask. And I've seen, and this is so it's so disturbing to see these uncivil comments online. People say, well, if you're worried about it, you just go virtual. Now, the uncivil response to that is, well, if you don't want to wear a mask, then just don't come to school. Now, this is what's happening going back and forth, and it's not very civil. There does need to be respect for both parties, but we can't simply say, you know, across the board that a public safety measure, yes, it impinges on some form of freedom. They virtually all do, whether that be a seatbelt law, speed limits, driving on the right-hand side of the road. These are the conventions that we embrace so that we can live together in close society. I'm good where we're at right now.
Right.
I mean, I want to be clear. I want to try to take the air out of the heightened discussion of this, because we need to approach it like we're trying to protect each other.
Exactly.
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed on behalf of 500 school districts in Western PA that, not that Governor Wolf or the CDC didn't make it a mandate, but they did sort of the worst thing. They said, you really need to do this, but we're going to leave it up to you, because they didn't want the
lack
heat,
of
right?
leadership.
I mean, it's brutal. It's brutal. None of us, and I speak for, you know, the 450 board members around the state, none of us need that right now, you know, but they kicked the can down to us, and I think it's unfortunate. I hope, and there's many more of you online than there are here, but I hope you here too can understand how we feel about that as well. That's a tough situation. So now we got to wrestle with the whole ball of wax, right?
Yeah, see, I would take a different tact. I would say that the state giving control back to the locality is exactly the way it should be, and I'm in favor of that. You know, we'll, as a locality, as a board, will make a decision. You know, I'll go along with that decision, but I like the fact that it's at the local level and not at the state or the federal shoving it down our throats. That's all.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
I agree, Greg. I'll take the can, Peter.
It's all yours.
And I think that, for me, the difference this year is the vaccine. That's a game changer.
Huge.
And much more weight is assigned to giving parents the choice this year for me. I mean, it's going to take a lot for me to approve any kind of plan that requires masking.
How do you
Well,
think
that
differently,
means you're gonna
11 and under
ignore-
versus 12 and over?
I would say yes. However, I would still say it's up to the parents. It's risk, and what are the parents comfortable? They have to balance so much. It definitely changes the decision, but I still say give it to the parents.
So,
Would you give a parental decision to send their child to school with lice? Oh, my child has lice, but I'm still going to send them to school. I'll put something on their head and it should be okay.
The parents who are concerned can have their kids wear a mask. The parents who are not can let their kids go without a mask.
But that does not limit spread if there's substantial spread.
The student
I
wearing the
also
mask
don't
is
think-
mitigating risk for that student.
I don't think we should discount federal level professional health advice, because that is the gold standard and the highest standard for how decisions should be made.
Well, it's also politicized, Matt. I mean, it's a different year.
It is not maybe
It is
it's being-
politicized.
But not, doctors don't politicize their information. They don't.
I would
They
disagree with
take
you on
an
that.
oath. They take an oath. Doctors are the most trusted
Look,
set of
I think I
people in the
answered the question like that was asked, that's all. I mean, we can just agree to disagree.
I think we should do the survey and see what it says. My main point is, That needs to be weighed against a whole list of other factors, and to stake out in advance a position that says, oh, we're gonna base it only on that survey, or under no circumstances would I consider advice coming from federal level or state level health department or health officials, to me seems like you're discounting some very important information. And I don't think it should be discounted.
I'm just elevating the importance of giving parents a choice, that's all.
So here's what I would say. So, and this has been, again, people are exhausted with COVID, with a million things. They're tired of masks. They're tired of seemingly easy things being harder than they need to be when it comes to day-to-day living. We want our kids to feel good about going to school. We want them to be excited about being involved in an activity. We want them to learn, grow. I mean, these are all things that we want. You know, one of the things that feels like it's happening more and more is we focus on one or two or a few areas of disagreement instead of the things which I think are shared values and beliefs. We value a quality education. We know that a quality education is more than math. It's more than English. It is math, it is English, but it's more than that. And so from our standpoint, you know, you ask me, as in my role, you will ask me for my recommendation. That's the way it has been. That's the way it will continue to be. My recommendation is our recommendation as a team. It'll be based on what the CDC is saying and what the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying and what PA Department of Health and the Pennsylvania Department of Education are saying and what the Allegheny County Health Department are saying. And it will include the 12 subject matter experts who are residents of this district, who are part of the Healthcare Council, who have children in our schools. They have a voice. They help us understand and say. I do not like when broad brush recommendations get made, because a one-size-fits-all recommendation generally doesn't fit for most. And that's the biggest challenge of the CDC's reversal, is that we go from here to here. They have reasons. You can agree or disagree with the reasons, but they have them. And so how does that fit? What's different about communities? Well, one of the things that's different about communities is the level of virus in them. Not all parts of the United States have the same level of virus. If we don't feel any differently in low than we do in extremely high, well, I don't know what that says. So it feels like there should be something there, right? The way it's listed for schools right now, but from the CDC's, whatever it was, July 27th, it just says schools. That doesn't feel right, because it feels overly broad, painted across all schools across the entire country without any difference. Doesn't feel right. It doesn't mean we ignore what's valuable in it. It just means it doesn't feel right because it's overly broad and not specific to our area and location. I believe that in health and safety responsibilities, when the vaccine is not available, it is not available. I had hoped September was the time frame for a 5 to 11-year-old approval, emergency use authorization. When we left last school year, there was like, hey, September looks like the time period. It is not going to be September. So professionally, I feel different. I feel different about 11 and under than I do about 12 and older, because at 12 and older, adults and students who are interested in receiving the vaccine have had an opportunity to receive a vaccine. So that impacts that will impact my recommendation, Mark. And then ultimately, this piece about parents is just to understand. I have no idea. Here's what I think. I think at the high school level, far fewer parents will have planned to send their student back to school with a mask on than K to 3. That's what I think. I don't know that. That's why I want to ask them. If 90% of K to 3 families were planning to send their child back to school in a mask, I think that's important information for us to understand. Whatever the number is, I have no idea what it's going to be. You didn't ask, I would say this, if there is a mandate, there's likely going to be a waiver or exemption. Because we don't want to spend all day trying to enforce something that is unenforceable. We don't want to take politically something into our school buildings and then impact the very thing we're trying to accomplish, which is meaningful learning in an in-person environment. So my guess is that there will be some form of waiver or exemption if we get to the place where that's what we're talking about. Why do people generally waive things? Medical reasons, religious reasons, or sometimes other urgent reasons that don't fit into either of those categories. And generally what we do is we receive it, we talk to them, and then most of the time it's something that we do. So it's something to think about. So that even in that case where it's the district's position, and again, you're asking me to play at what instant, here's what I'd like to do. Let's send something out to parents and see what they're thinking.
Well, I'm fine with the survey. Yeah, I think knowing is better than not knowing. So
I don't think it needs to be more complex. Meaning, does your opinion change at substantial versus moderate versus high? Because that's a nuance that I'm not sure, I think for us, we have to understand, based on where things are right now, what are you thinking? If you weren't thinking about the possibility of quarantine, for a short term, would you be thinking about a mask as a hedge against needing to quarantine? Like, where's the trade-off there? I think those are the kind of things that I think are important to understand. And then, again, we'll talk about it. And then ultimately, I think to my point is just that in 42 Allegheny County school districts, this is the conversation. In 500 in Pennsylvania, this is the conversation. So every local governance is going to have to make the call on how do we feel about this and why. That's all.
Okay.
Yep.
Just 1 second, I'm just getting back in. We do have some voting items tonight. We'll handle those first, as we always do. Item 3.01 is a motion to approve personnel and supplementals as attached.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.02 is a motion to approve the updated personnel list for the summer 2021 educational programs as attached.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.03 is a motion to approve the purchase of 5 doors from A.G. Marrow in the amount of $22,980
Second.
as attached.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.04 is a motion to approve the purchase of new furniture for the high school library via CoStars.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries, and I like the new furniture style and the flexibility. You guys have talked about that before, thank you. Item 3.05 is a motion to approve the application for Act 80 exception days as outlined.
Second.
Is there any discussion? There's a lot of meat in here, but it's worth reading. if you care about snow days, flexible instruction days, people ask about that. How many days of school do we have to meet? How we handle it, how we get to the flexibility. I think this is probably the lengthiest write-up you've done on this motion because it's, over the years, it's evolved. But it's a great resource to understand how we get to where we are in this public content.
Yeah, this is all Dr. Justice, so thank you, Dr. Justice, for that.
You're welcome.
We literally have 3 things next year. We have this, we have a general flexibility waiver given to all school districts in Pennsylvania, and we have the flexible instructional days, which we went through that process. We've got, not knowing what's coming, we have plenty of ways to deal with it.
I know it feels like an art from the outside. It's clearly a science, and thank you, Dr. Justice, for laying it out. All those in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.06 is a motion to approve the annual software and support licensing renewals as attached.
Second.
All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.07 is a motion to dispose of technology equipment in accordance with policy 622.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.08 is a motion to approve the agreement between Pine-Richland School District and DQE Communications for WAN services to the Pine Center at the library.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Kashani, Finance, please.
Yes, sir. Item 4.01 is information only. For at the regular meeting in a couple weeks, we'll be approving some financial reports and accounts payable. 4.02 is just a statement that we will not have any budget transfers until October, per code.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
Mr. DiTullio.
Item 5.01 will be a motion for an action item at the at the regular meeting for approval of chiller compressor replacement. Apparently we had one go out at the high school. Not an optimal time for that to happen. Item 5.02 will be ratification of a change order on roof replacements. Details are attached. And 5.03 is a summer project update, and I believe Mr. Zimmerman is on.
He is.
Yep.
Yeah, hello everyone, can you hear me?
We can.
You can, all right, great. So the summer project list is updated. It does have the cost information that Mr. Kashani asked for during the June meeting. So if you have any questions on the actual cost of the projects, they are listed. We're making some pretty good progress, and we've got a few weeks to go before school opens back up. You can see outside that the tennis court project is finally, the paving is down. So thank you for that change order approval last time, and that contractor was able to get a lot done in the last 2 weeks. Also, the paving at the high school and middle school complex are just about finished. We're firmly into our library renovation projects, both at the high school and middle school, so those will finish up. But some of those projects will be right up until the last week before we come back to school. If you have any other questions about any of the other projects, you can ask me directly or send me an email.
Mr. Zimmerman, thank you for adding that cost detail. Very helpful.
Yep.
And may I go back? I didn't have a chance to ask a question about 5.02. What is the driver for that change? It's almost 50 grand. That's a big rock.
Let me go back to the board docs. 5.02 is the roof. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, within the roof, the contractors are finishing up right now. The first part of that's the $17,100 line item is for whenever we upgraded our roof to a R30 insulation, it added a little over 2.5 inches to the height of the roof. And now when it meshes into the side of the building where there are metal panels, those metal panels, they don't flash into the side of the roof as well. So they're going to change those panels out. That will be an insurance adjustment, and we've already talked to our adjuster about that. That will be reimbursed by our insurance provider, CM Regent. The other part of that change order is for us to correct some roof leaks that we've had for the last 5 years or so at the building that are unrelated to the roof work that's being done for the hail damage. But now's the right time to attack those. So we have some pretty decent roof leaks over by the white stairs where the old part of the building meets the 300 and 400 wing. And we also have some leaks right by the athletics office. And we have a chance now, while we have the metal roof off, to go ahead and change out some of the rubber there, and that'll take care of those roof leaks from having to be addressed later.
Okay, thank you very much.
And just unless anyone has an objection, 5.01 and 5.02, I would move to put into a consent agenda for the regular meeting. And then, Mr. Zimmerman, just a couple questions. The delayed and canceled projects, I know we've got to do some bids on the delayed. Does this have anything to do with equipment backlog and things like that, or is this just we ran out of time to do it?
Yeah, so some of the projects that we wanted to spend the ESSERS 3 money on were HVAC upgrades. Right now, HVAC units have a 12-week lead time on them. So that would have pushed us back. Even if we ordered the beginning of the summer, we wouldn't have got them in time. In addition to that, there are some complex controls that we're going through with those. So the controls that we have at some of the older buildings like Wexford Elementary and Richland Elementary are old pneumatic controls. And we have to make sure that the units that we purchase with the electronic controls will still talk to pneumatics and they'll be able to be upgraded later. So it added some complexity to that. But honestly, it's the 12-week lead time that's really driving those. Okay. And with the canceled projects, I listed that on there. We were looking into adding some bipolar ionization to the rooms to kind of help us with ventilation and filtration for COVID virus. And right now, the data is showing that there's some things that that technology is being looked at as far as health-wise. So we want to delay a little bit on those to get a little bit more wait and see to see how that technology works well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the latest data is not going in the right direction there.
Yeah.
It's showing that it's creates ionization in ozone, and it's a respiratory irritant. So it's just not, the data's not coming in that those are effective technologies now.
Anything else on buildings and grounds? All right, I'll move into 6 academic achievements, and 6.01 is a pack-back update. It's for information, and is there someone in administration?
Yeah, I'll take that, Mr. DiTullio. This, again, just an informational item. This is an opportunity for us to engage in a pilot program with a company called Packback. It is for students at the secondary, primarily this year is going to be at the high school level. And it's a pretty unique program. It provides students with feedback on their writing early on in their writing process. So a couple of the recommendations coming out of in-depth programs through program reviews around Socratic seminars and teaching students the skill set of developing quality questions, developing the argument. This program gives a little bit of that electronic feedback first. So as students are writing, they'll get feedback through the program. They'll be able to tighten up their writing prior to then getting feedback from their teachers and from the other students in the classroom. So we feel like it's a nice opportunity to engage. This is a program that a lot of universities are starting to use. University of Pittsburgh, University of Penn State University are using it, a couple others locally. So to give our students some exposure and opportunity here at the high school level to determine if it's something that we want to continue with down the road. We wanted to enter this pilot for this first semester. Small pilot, group of 3 English teachers and 4 social studies teachers to start.
Any questions? All right. Moving into student services. 7.01, I'm going to read these a bit out of order. 701, 702, 704, and 705 are going to be motions at the regular meeting. 701 is to approve the My Family Services agreement for 2021-2022. 702 is the Glade Run Day Student Education Agreement that we'll be voting on at the regular meeting. 704 is a motion to approve at the regular meeting the approval of allowing our teams to participate and travel to the Whitfield Championships for 2021 and 2022, as well as 705 is for the PIAA state championship trips. Those 4 items, unless anyone has discussion or comments, I would move to put into a consent agenda. Any comments? Okay. 703, I would like to keep pulled out. It's it'll be for board consideration at the regular meeting. Motion to accept in accordance with Board Policy 702, and with sincere gratitude, a donation by an anonymous staff member of approximately $495 for percussion equipment. And then 706, and I will apologize ahead of time if I butcher any names. 7.06 is an information item on Wednesday, July 21st, 2021. The Pine-Richland Athletic Hall of Fame Selection Committee met to review the submitted nominations based on the Hall of Fame bylaws. 5 nominees and 1 team, 5 individual nominees and 1 team were selected to be inducted into this year's class. Art Bosetti, am I right? Bosetti. Football, wrestling, basketball was his sports. John Harold was football, track and field. Caitlin Molloy, Malloy, sorry, was swimming. Ed Novak was basketball, baseball, football, and track. And I'm sorry, I don't have all the years there. And Michael Van Sickle was a golf nominee. Also, the 1970 football team that went undefeated, that team, and only gave up 47 points all season. The induction ceremonies will be recognized 6:45, October 1st, 2021, prior to the Pine-Richland football home game, with a banquet on Saturday the 2nd.
Thank you, Greg. Dr. Mihalik.
Item 8.01 will be a motion to approve personnel, supplemental, and transportation items at the regular August board meeting. I don't know if there's anything else there, we'll see. Item 8.02 is also for consideration at the regular meeting, is a motion to authorize the superintendent and director of human resources to hire staff as necessary after August 16th to be formally approved by the board at the September 13th school board meeting.
Just quick question, how are we looking on staff at this point?
Okay, there we go. So heading into about a week ago, we had about 11 vacancies remaining. That number has now shrunk. I'm excited to see exactly how far, given the personnel items that were approved today. So we did receive additional resignations over the past, like literally Thursday and Friday of this past week, and I have some catching up to do. We're absolutely in single digits as we approach with multiple positions for which we're hiring, advancing into sort of second and third round interviews. So I expect to be in good shape by then. I'm going to know exactly how good shape by tomorrow morning.
And that's for regular full-time staff. How are we looking on supplementals? I know we have fall sports coming up, coaching. I know there was a lot of change in coaching. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I feel like I don't feel like we've approved a number of in particular one sports coaches at the rate that I would have thought. So I'm just curious where we are with that as well.
Yep. So to your point, my initial update was specific to permanent positions. As it relates to supplementals, we still have, for fall sports specifically, some holes remaining in our football program, although those are primarily staffed, as well as girls volleyball and field hockey and cross-country coaches as well.
Thank you, Greg. Dr. Mahon? Well, I guess. Did you do the?
I'm
yeah, you're
finished
good.
with 8.02.
Item 9.01 for voting will be this is just an information item regarding the personal device insurance program, which will be offered to students, to the two families, in order to insure the school devices, since we are now a one-to-one, essentially one-to-one.
I do have one question about that for Dana. So in the public content section, first sentence, it says at no cost to the district, but then on the attachment, there's it's not a lot, but it's can buy a few pizzas. One-to-one program fee of about 11 grand. So what is that?
So unfortunately, I know that Sean has been working with the insurance company on that piece. When I was in on the preliminary conference calls about it, there was no cost to the district. So we will circle back with them. I know that there were a host of things that were submitted to Sean today and Friday, but he is out this week, so we will circle back next week and get that addressed with them.
So that 10-9-14 should go to 0.
It should.
Okay.
Again, to the knowledge that I had from the preliminary conference call,
Okay.
I am also a parent at a different school district that uses this exact same program through this same provider. And it is extraordinarily easy to use, not only to just opt in and make the small payment for the insurance plan, but on the rare occasion that you might actually have to file a claim, it's very, very easy. But yes, we will follow up on the cost with you.
It's a nice program, yeah.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. On that, and Dana, I don't know if you're the right person for this, but on the cost to the families, some of our families, that may be a burden to. If it's a burden to the families to pay for their portion of the insurance plan, obviously, if there's a replacement, that would be a burden as well. Do we have a plan in place, or are we considering a plan in place to help mitigate those issues, insurances for some of the families that might not be able to afford it?
I know it's one of the items. So likely what would happen is that, again, we would not be purchasing an insurance program for them, basically. But if there was a device that needed to be replaced and or repaired, we typically in other programs have handled those situations one-off, because in our office, confidentially, Rachel McCarthy is the one person who has the listing. We ensure that listing is not released beyond her, but typically she knows who those families are, and then she can work with them directly. So yes, we will do that.
I don't know if a cost to the district, and I don't know how many get ruined or need repaired, but would it be advantageous, and Mark, I'll ask you this as an insurance guy, wouldn't we be better off mitigating that risk by buying insurance policies for those families rather than absorb a full cost? It's just I don't know what the cost would be to buy for all those families.
Yeah,
but it seems like one computer would be worth it.
Typically, I would, in this case, I'm going to actually defer to Mr. Stevener, who, again, is out this week. But I know one of the conversations that he did have with the carrier on the first conference call was about that. And some of it was about at what point does it make sense? What types of repairs can still be done in-house at low cost, and how all of that works out. So I do believe that he was leaning towards not purchasing those for those families, based on, again, the occurrence and the occurrence probability, and then the total cost. But again, we'll follow up.
Yeah, Chromebooks, especially Chromebooks, they're pretty cheap. It
Yeah,
might
they
be
are.
better to just self-insure, what we call self-insure those, yeah.
We're not going to have any communication regarding that. So when I think back to Greg's point, though, free and reduced price lunch, it's maybe they get the insurance, maybe they don't get the insurance, and they're panicked, and their Chromebooks crack screen for 2 weeks, and they're kind of hiding it from mom and dad, and they're like, right.
Sean does have a draft communication that he has been doing back and forth with the company. They provide him with a template, and I thought I saw something might have been Thursday or Friday last week, where they were making a few changes. And I will, again, follow up in a summary email to him, just again to make sure that if there is not something in there that addresses that, we can follow up with that.
Could you also, Dana, ask Gallagher what they're making commission-wise on those fees?
The Gallagher Commission, you mean?
Yeah, if they're collecting $20 a family or a device rather, what are they making on that?
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else on device insurance? Next item, 10.01, recording of governance meetings. We did have a discussion of this about a month ago. Mark, you had raised this topic, and as we previewed the agenda, me and Christine with Dr. Miller last week, we wanted to elevate the item again, but it occurred in our conversation that there was some divergence of opinion on the topic of the board. There wasn't a clear-cut consensus. And that perhaps we should formalize. We've had a long-standing practice of not recording them, but in this environment, maybe making it a policy, one way or the other. We felt clear that making this policy and resolving that ambiguity, right? Moving away from custom toward written practice made sense. At the same time,
Can I just add a quick comment? Because the language is new, we're talking about committee meetings.
Right.
Okay,
right.
so I know we're calling them joint governance, but we're really talking about the meetings that happen generally at 6 o'clock.
AKA
Committee meetings, okay,
Yeah.
just to be clear.
Yeah.
I'll try to use that as often as possible.
Formerly known
That's
as
fine.
committee. Yeah.
So when we talked about that, though, and said, okay, let's make that a policy, it also felt appropriate, though, to address really our meeting policies in general. We have a lot of back and forth, a lot of interest in, for instance, public participation. How do we manage that? Right? We're following a policy that is pretty much a decade and a half old, aligns in some respects with other boards, but has differences versus other boards. So there are elements that other boards use that move public comment to the end of the meeting for non-agenda items, limit the time in different ways. Do we record public comment, all public comment, in even our committee meetings? We do have some presenters that actually would prefer not to be recorded at committee meetings specifically, we're aware of. So how do we address that? It goes really to also the idea of communications and board communications. We value stakeholder input. We do. And we value dialogue. One of the things we've mentioned many times is how we want to recreate those committee meetings in our joint governance meetings where we have some opportunity for informal discussion and dialogue, right, Greg? I mean, that's something we've talked about. How you sort of mandate that or dictate that, I'm not sure, but it's a relevant consideration. Having that dialogue by speaking, from the Diaz, from here behind tables, doesn't work. Having it from the stage in the auditorium, right, doesn't work. It can fail to convey the right tone, right? These are hard things to do. And yet, sometimes public comment is, I think, being used as a stage. Is it there for us to listen? I mean, I got lots of input in letters, lots of various opinions in letters about our health and safety plan. Right? That was good. I read them all. There's a lot of them. That's useful input. We hear input, but we've certainly seen, and I don't want to over-highlight tonight, because really I had this outlined prior to that, was that our meetings are sometimes used as a soapbox. they happen. Or inappropriate or personal accusations. There's only so much we can do. I don't know, but I think at this point, having seen all of that, we could think about addressing it in policy. Maybe we don't. Maybe we don't. Maybe we say this is where we're at and we don't want to err that way. But I would like to wrap that up into a discussion. There's only 5 of us here tonight, I know, and that's a lot to consider in ways we could address. But I thought for tonight, it would be helpful to think about the purpose of our meetings, even if we can just establish a purpose. So this is like a mission, vision, value statement for the organization. Why do we have public comment? Why do we have meetings, right? What was it about, what value in our meetings was there that you suggested we should record them? Because it fulfills a greater purpose. So I think we can get to some of those shared purposes relatively easily and in a straightforward way. And then as we look at various policy elements, like should we record this meeting or not? Should we have the public comment at the end of the meeting for certain items, where you're not voting? Some of those things might fall into place a little bit better because they're fulfilling a purpose that we've already agreed we share and we're trying to get to. Does that make sense as I've mapped it out? I want to talk about our meeting purpose, recording the electronic participation we have now, right? So it's been consistent. We have more people. I don't know how many are still connected online. I know at one point in terms of initial signups, Barbara showed me we had over 200 for tonight's meeting, and that's been typical. So what do we do with that? I know we've talked about that as we moved back into our meetings. With the emergency declarations over in Pennsylvania, by the way, all our meetings must have a physical nexus. We can't do an open meeting without a physical nexus at this point. So we do have, the requirement for a presence here when we're having a public meeting. But what do we do with the virtual component? So I have no policy suggestions, and we can come up with menu items of things to advance it, but I thought it appropriate to revisit some of those. And so I would start with that question of, it's not just about public comment, right? Why do we have a meeting? Why do we have board meetings? Why are they public?
Are we focused on the committee meetings, or are you talking about?
I think both. If we're going to wrap it in, it would certainly be addressed in the same policy. And the committee meetings, it should be, in policy, there's not a big distinction, at least practically speaking, but we could make one. Practically speaking, we've treated our committee meetings in the same way as open voting meetings, essentially, in terms of disclosure.
Well,
right, they're public. We hold them publicly, and we just the recording is one area where that divergence became apparent, especially during COVID.
In a democratic system, there's supposed to be dialogue. For people who value self-governance, at least historically in how this was set up, is that people are supposed to contribute because they care. And they're supposed to contribute because they have the interests of the community at heart for a good outcome, for good faith discussion. That's ideally how it's supposed to work. Now, it gets translated into performative acts that are geared to achieve political objectives that aren't necessarily always aligned with what's healthiest for the community. But that it's hard to prevent that from happening and still allow a wide open dialogue in democratic society. So it's putting checks and balances so that productive discussion happens while allowing the maximum flexibility of discussion. And the final point is democracies work better when people are informed. So having information that's shared and having people have access to information is an important function. And in the ideal case, when people are participating in good faith, that, you know, maximizing information would make sense. So that speaks to recording the committee meetings, making them available, knowing that we're acting in good faith and out of the hopes that people in the community are also acting in good faith and we can have a dialogue.
Let's not even get to, don't do that second sentence yet. Recording committee meetings may or may not be information.
I didn't. So don't suggest that I would, please. Thank you.
Let's see if it is or not, right?
Well, I'll just focus on committees for now. I think that's all I have the energy for. But, I mean, committees, you don't need committees, but it certainly would make your regular meetings a lot longer to get into the weeds that the committees do. So committees, for me, serve the purpose of getting really granular on issues where you need to really talk through and figure out stuff, right? There's a lot of unanswered questions that go into a committee conversation that emerge with some type of solution or recommendation for the, so to do that kind of heavy lifting without the committee, I think would be really hard.
It's just chunking the work. I think it's
chunking the work,
It's
right.
true, yeah.
Yeah, part of that, though, is those discussions that happen at the committee or joint governance meetings, to not record them. So sometimes people will see us and an agenda item will come up in the regular meeting. We've already hashed it out for an hour and a half. That's how we got to our consensus. And people will have the impression that you blew through it. If that committee meeting, even if the data is there, even if the background data is there, but that discussion, that organic discussion that happens, without that being recorded and somebody being able to, that is interested, being able to go back and look at that, they might miss the nuances of how did we actually get to that. You know, Mark and I may come at a subject on a different angle, and then where we end up might be closer to Mark, might be closer to me, but we hashed it out and discussed that. Without that background, without people being able to see that may make it seem that it's very bland when we get into the regular meeting. You know, we have those committee meetings to help these meetings, like you said, go smoother, and we really get into the weeds at those committee meetings. That's why I think they should be recorded. Joint governance, I keep wanting to say committee.
Well, in the issue of recording, I suggest, I threw that out there after one such meeting, not too long ago, where we were called to be vulnerable and talk about DEI. And we were talking about language, we were talking about definitions, and I questioned the definition of equity. And I contrasted that with the definition of equality and what it meant to me. And I did that, like, you know, just talking with the fellow board who was there, but we had it live streamed. And then I was attacked at the comment section at the end of that meeting by someone who was actually in this room tonight at the beginning of the, and he accused me of being the problem because I was white. And so I wanted a recording of that for the truth, so that an objective hearer of the conversation could determine themselves what was actually said, rather than it being skewed in media by that same person. So I like a record of the truth. I speak openly, I speak honestly. I have no problem with debating whether it's recorded or not in a very respectful, kind, honest way. And so I thought that I was so disgusted by what was said of me that I wanted a record of that. I didn't have it. So then that's why I raised the issue.
I mean, the issue is performative acts that are done to play to an audience rather than resolve something that is a real good faith problem. You know, I feel attacked from today. I felt personally attacked today at this meeting.
You were.
And it was recorded and it was broadcast to 200 or so people. Yeah. And, you know, what am I supposed to do? So that to me is a performative act that, you know, to what extent does that advance democratic discussion, debate, dialogue, good faith efforts on the part of our community? You know, I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know if it's possible to limit it. It may just be a consequence of openness, even with putting guidelines on it like we saw at the beginning of the meeting. It is part of the cost of having an open society that these things happen. You know, I would much rather have it an open discussion and debate and open dialogue with people than an authoritarian system where those things can't happen. We definitely don't want that.
Absolutely, but there's in between.
I agree.
So if you want to go watch your Pine Township Supervisor meeting where they appointed a new township manager, the first in a decade and a half, God bless you, but you can't. If you wanted to stream it, you can't. I mean, and that's true for many,
It's
many,
true of
many
most
school districts
meetings.
as well.
Yeah, it's health departments, it's
Well,
county government, it's county
Well,
council
and recording and
meetings.
streaming are two different things,
They are.
right?
They are.
Yeah.
That's why I want to get it down.
Yeah.
Could I make a comment? Hello. I'm of the theory of opinion that a public meeting is public. We should treat them all the same. Yes, a committee/governance meeting is different content, but it's still public. So if we're going to record one type of meeting, such as planning or general, we should probably record the committee. Because yes, we can get the background of what's discussed and what's being voted on. We have the record of what was said, what was not said. It does limit the ability to twist things. And it is just a better way to put ourselves in front of the public and say, here's all of it. You know, obviously, you know, there's executive session type things we cannot publicly discuss, but everything we can, here it is. It's at your fingertips. If you have questions, concerns, you can look at that. And one thing you brought up, it's not about the recording, but in terms of public speakers, you could have, you mentioned, break out the types of speakers when they can speak. So if you have a concern for something that's on the agenda, we should hear that before we get to that agenda item. If it's not on the agenda, maybe it's something we need at another meeting, they could speak at the end of the meeting or bring up a new issue that we're unfamiliar with. That way, there's a little more flow. We're not being distracted before the meat and potatoes of the meeting with issues that are not on the table. So just some thoughts.
That's pretty common, and it does facilitate the conduct of business. It does, what I will say.
The what?
The conduct of business.
So no one mentioned that yet.
Right.
Why do we have meetings?
And
Why do we have meetings?
Well, to conduct
our business.
Right, well, that's.
Well, I don't know that we can
just-
do those other things, but we have to do that at a meeting.
I just want to say one more thing. There is, so I myself have given a lot of public comments at county level public meetings. And I do know that governing bodies can use that tactic as a strategy to wear the public down, to force them to wait to the end of a meeting to talk about an important matter, and intentionally choose not to put those items on the agenda for that meeting, so that the public will have to sit 2, 3, 4, 5 hours before their grievance or whatever concern they have can be aired to the governing body. And so, you know, I don't think that is a good practice, and I think that that is something else that we would want to be concerned about, is we don't want to set up a system where people in the audience are forced to sit for hours before they can speak their mind. So that's the other counterbalance of that. We do need to conduct business. People do have important things to say. We have to figure out how to sort that out.
Peter, just to go back to, I thought of something that I wanted to just, for the record, also state that the other benefit of the committee meetings is that there is dialogue, right? Where
Sometimes, yeah.
Where sometimes there, and because it's not as formal, you know, of a framework as our planning and voting meetings are.
It feels like this discussion is a perfect joint committee meeting topic.
It may be. It may be. I wanted to start and do it openly. We're as a, I should announce publicly, because I didn't feel that we reached a place. We're going to keep doing what we did, which is not recording.
Yeah.
And you know, there were a number of topics raised. I find it interesting. You got to the last one to conduct the business of this organization. That is actually first in my list. It's first because it's the only one that can be done here this way. There is no act that we can approve that can be approved in any other way. It's not illegal. We have to do that here. Do we have to communicate here? Is it the best way? Last month's meeting was pretty important, right? An email from Ms. Hathorn reaches 10 to 8 times as many people saw that meeting. Did we really communicate? I mean, I see the number of people posting about our discussion tonight about masks, or our academic achievement committee and academic growth, or policies regarding AP exams. Is anyone looking at those meetings? Now, right now, we're seeing numbers, a few hundred. How many, when you send out an email, we're gonna send something, just to give people a sense of numbers, right? A sense of scale. We're sending a survey to all families. Assuming you get a 50% open rate, how many people are gonna see that?
Yeah, typically on our open rates, we do see more than half of the emails we have in the system, but families have 2 or 3 emails and usually one person they designate. So you're asking how many people actually read the email?
Well, I'm saying your open rate, it's gonna get exposed to over 2,000
Oh, yeah.
eyeballs.
More.
2,000 people with eyes, 4,000, 2,000. Our meetings never will see that, never. And not, we'll see, because I wanna listen too, but to be clear, I'm not so sure the things that I said tonight about the health and safety plan help somebody understand where we're at in 30 seconds, which is what they want. I mean, we had to go over, to be clear, right? You have to wear a mask on the bus, and we're recommending masks for non-vaccinated individuals. That's what 3,000 of our families want. 500 want a little bit more, and then 50 want a whole lot more. Possibly, on a number of topics. So, is this the best form to communicate? Because the amount of time, I don't know how to explain to people the concept you said, Greg, right? We did a lot of work on this in a committee, or we were back and forth in email, not as a group, but individually to the administration, or sharing a perspective, or asking questions of senior leadership to get to the point where I understand this motion, I understand this work. I don't know how to substitute that. We can put on a sort of performative act ourselves. I don't know if that's very valuable either, and record it.
There are a couple of things. One is the emails that get sent out, right? That is an information broadcast.
Right.
Where the meaning-making aspect is not part of what's there, or maybe a few highlights that led to the meaning-making.
Recording it is simply a broadcast.
Well, I'm saying the email that was sent out, That's you typically don't get at the deeper meaning-making discussion aspect that reflects different perspectives. So someone who's just interested in, okay, what did they do, and I just want to see what happened, that's an excellent way to do that. But if someone is interested in the process that we go through, or the different factors in the shaping of something, that doesn't convey that. But a meeting does, and a recording of that meeting does as well too. The challenge with a recorded meeting is that it somehow gives a sense that something is more finalized than what it is. Broadcasting recordings of debates needs to be clarified so that people know there's a lot of uncertainty that goes into some of the discussions, particularly at committee meetings.
And I understand the downsides of recording. Someone may not feel as comfortable expressing their true opinion in a recording committee meeting, which would defeat the committee meeting's true purpose. For me, I'm a pretty simple person, and I'd like a record of the truth. And That's really all it is with me, to record the committee meetings. I like a record of the truth. It's good to have.
You'd like a record of what was said at the meeting.
Yes.
Truth is,
Well, what was said is not the truth? Oh, we're getting really philosophical now.
no, it's not, no. Things may be said in meetings that are not true. Absolutely, happens all the time, right?
But it would be true that I said it.
Right, that's what I said. It's a record
That's
of
what I
what was
mean.
said.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Well, good start, Peter. I don't know if we should take it much further tonight, but.
We don't necessarily need to. There are
That was
only
one
5
step
of us.
short of an Abbott and Costello.
That-
That final piece was right on the edge of going first.
Mark's always good at stopping that before it gets too
You know, it's
serious.
9:29, so.
Yeah, that's somewhat of a starting point. We'll talk again. Greg, if we can fit it into a committee meeting, I mean, you know. Joint governance meeting.
Or didn't we come up with another name?
That was where we
Right.
settled.
I think that was it.
By the way, you're gonna touch this policy probably around the same time, which is meetings, so but that we had hit last year, so if we can come up with a better name by all means. But yeah, we can table it until, and if you have thoughts, share them in the meantime. And we'll bring something back with some of these thoughts, some of these elements, sort of laid out so we can talk about them more and get the input of other board members. Okay. Are there any reports from board members? The administration? Item 1102, recognition of visitors. Would anyone like to address the board at this time?
I did sign up.
Is Ms. Purcell the only, do we only have one?
She's the only
Okay.
one, yeah.
Well, here I am again. Well, first I should say Christina Brusalis, 1007 Victoria Place in Richland Township. And here I am again, taking the stage. And I have to say that what I have witnessed tonight, I would like to disagree with your solicitor that this board respects our right to public comment. Sunshine Law gives constituents a forum for comment on issues that are of concern or important to them. It is the most basic form of public participation. And this podium here, while it might be a soapbox to you, it is the designated forum for our community and this school district. The Sunshine Act is pretty narrow in what sorts of rules you can impose, such as time, place, or manner. For example, whether some form of speech is disruptive or not. But you cannot cut someone off just because you don't like what they are saying, or you don't agree with it, or they are telling you something that you don't like, or that they are telling you that they don't like the job that you're doing. By forcing Ms. Baxter here tonight to modify her story, I think it amounted to not only cruel action, but also a form of censorship. Because she was telling her story, and it involved a public official in their public role here at Pine-Richland School District. And I would like to recommend that your solicitor please refer to Bach versus School Board of the City of Virginia Beach, where I believe it was in 2001, the U.S. District Court found that it was unconstitutional, that they were limiting a Bach speech because of a policy of not having personal attacks. So moving on, there's another thing I'd like to bring up is that for the second time in as many months, I noticed that there was the hiring of an assistant principal without publishing it first in the agenda and the supplementals that you put out earlier. Well, I know that it's not illegal right now, although that rule is changing, at the end of the month with the Sunshine Act revision that was passed recently, that you need to at least provide 24 hours notice. I still find that it's problematic that it was important for this board to notify the public of a cafeteria monitor that was being hired at $12.55 an hour, but didn't publish the $98,000 salary that was just approved for an assistant principal until the start of this meeting. While I understand that currently this might be okay, in the interest of being transparent and open with this community and allowing us the opportunity to react and understand what's going on at the meeting, I find that it's important that that kind of information, especially a $98,000 a year salary, should be published. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Briselis. I will just note for the record, the item, the appointment of the position was in the agenda 24 hours in advance. You acknowledge that?
Yes,
That- but not,
not the salary. You were publishing coaches and you were publishing the cafeteria monitors and paraprofessionals, but that one item, the largest ticket item, was not.
thank you. And in terms of, by the way,
What was
we're,
his name?
yeah, we're here to work with you, by the way. And I said this, let me,
I'd like, and as my role as a community person, I find that these meetings, not only to conduct business, but also is to hear from us. And this is one of those issues that I'd like to see changed. I want to see more transparency, not less. I want to see more videos so that we can go back and understand what's happening. It's hard to follow these meetings. If I hadn't been bird dogging this issue all day long to see when that would be published, if you sat in here, which is a reasonable thing to do, you never would have known what that salary was unless you had logged in at exactly 7 o'clock to know his name and to know the salary. He might be a really great assistant principal, and I hope he is, but I want to know these things in advance. If it's important enough to put the cafeteria worker, I think the assistant principal needs to be.
Christine, thank you. So what I would say is this, is that you're referring to the new requirements under Act 65, which are enforced by the courts. And many of these items, in terms of the level of disclosure required, have not been established by the courts. We're working through that with you as well. So we will figure that out with our attorney. You
Established by the court to do what's right.
under,
You can always do more than the minimum that the court requires.
we can, and we'll have to figure out what that is, because that's not always better to do more disclosure, and I think we saw that this evening.
$12 an hour salary, I expect to know about the $100,000 one.
Let us know which ones matter. Yeah,
I just did.
thank you. Any other comments? There's no one else on the speaker list?
No, there's not.
Okay. No one ever signed it online at the end either, right?
No.
Did you look?
Oh, we did.
Okay. No more business? Meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.